So today I'm going to show you my approach on mixing a live rock band, and this is kind of how I start every band that I work for. I'll go through in isolation, line check, and just set stuff like gates, EQs, compressors to get a rough mix together so that when the band play at sound check and during the show, I can then dial it in a little bit more. But my approach is always the same for whichever band I'm working for, and kind of the theory behind what I'm doing with the channels and getting it ready for a rough mix. So I'm going to show you that today, and we're going to do this on the brand new Behringer WING Compact. Nice small compact desk, perfect for small tours and small venues, but it's the same on whatever console that I'm using, kind of same approach to the channels. And we'll split this into 3 parts, and we'll do all the drum channels together in this video, and then we'll do all the instruments and all the vocals together in separate ones. So if you want to see those, click subscribe down below, but let's get started with the drum channels. So let's jump onto the desk and take a look at my input list. So I've condensed my drums down to be a bit more typical of what you find in a small venue and what you'd kind of mix on a small desk like this. So we've got a kick drum, a snare top, snare bottom, hi-hat mic, rack tom, floor tom, and some stereo overheads. So I'll just unlock the console and take a listen to the kick drum there. So what you're listening to is recording on the SD card slot from the desk of the left and right feed. So as I turn stuff up, you'll be able to hear it, and you'll be able to hear what I'm changing. So just to note, this is a virtual soundcheck recording from a band called Funeral for a Friend from their performance at Download Festival. So all the gain has already been set from the recording at the time. So what I'd say is I normally aim for the gain on the peaks of the drums to be between like -18 and -12. So the first couple of yellow lights, usually on most desks, just remember that you need to set the gain first before doing any of the other stuff I'm about to do. But obviously I'm not setting the gain because it's already been pre-recorded. So this is kind of how I'd start as I was line checking a band in the venue. So I'd ask the drummer to play the kick drum, I'd select the channel, I'd set the gain, and then bring up the kick channel. And then I kind of just work my way down on this console, the left-hand side here, the channel strip. It's working through everything. So I'm just going to turn the filters on first and then just dial them back so we're not hearing them as much. And the first thing I'm going to do is turn on the gate. So, like I said before, we're kind of just getting a rough mix together. We want to be kind of quick as we do this. We don't want the drummer to be sat there playing the kick drum for too long. So we want to be quick, but we want to get everything kind of set to where we can easily adjust it as a band play. And we're in a good starting point for the band to be able to start playing the songs. So turning on the gate and turn this to gate mode. So we want the attack to be super quick because we want to let the transient through of the kick. We don't want to like choke the beat hitting the kick skin. So I kind of just set this, and then I turn this up until you hear it disappear, and then turn it back so you can hear the kick drum coming through, and kind of set it somewhere around there, and then adjust the hold and release a little bit. So we want to let the body of the kick come through. We don't want to choke it too much like this, but we want to let enough through, but not too much of the bleed from the other stuff. But obviously you won't hear that as you're line checking. But set it into a good place. The more you do it, the more you'll get used to where you want to set it. And the cool thing about the gate on this desk, and it is a feature on some of the other desks as well, but on this one, this accent feature kind of adds like a transient control. So you turn this up and you get a bit more of that front end attack from the kick. Obviously it sounds crazy at 100%, it's quite a lot, but maybe for a metal band you might want this sort of like super clicky sound. But for us, let's just start at about 50%. Giving us a bit more impact on that front end. And once I've got the gate set to kind of there, I'll go to my EQ section. And the first thing I do for all EQ on every channel is just set the high pass filter. And for a kick, I'd probably set it quite low, probably about 30 hertz. I want to let all the low end through. The kick drum is probably the lowest thing frequency-wise in my mix, but I still want to roll off these super lows, kind of clean up this bottom end. I don't want to be pushing the subs too much on bits that we can't hear. So I want to do that, and then same with the top end. I'll probably just bring this in a little bit because there's not going to be much above 15k that I want from the kick drum. So just let it roll off and give me a bit more headroom there for other stuff. So then turning on the EQ. For most drum shell channels, I'll start with the low mids, and I'll just give it a little boost and have a little listen around to where it sounds boxy and not very nice. So stuff like this, and then I'll just take it out quite a bit, keep it quite wide, and get it nice and tight. So it's already sounding a little bit better there, and then I'd probably take the top end and give it a little boost. For a metal band, you're probably looking at like between 5 and 10k. If you want to get like this super clicky stuff, you'll see quite a lot of like metal engineers have EQ like this, where it's loads of top end click. But if you're doing a rock band, you're probably between like 3K and 5K for your impact. So I'm probably going to go about 5K with this, and I'm not going to go too much. I'm just going to go around here, and then I know later when the band are playing, if I feel like I'm missing a bit of this top end, I know that this is the kind of click that I like, and I can just turn the gain up rather than having to search for it while the band's playing. It's kind of already set a little bit there. Then I normally go for these high mids, and on my kick drum I always find stuff around like 800 to 1K. Sounds a bit naff on a kick drum. Sounds a bit like knocking on plastic. So I always like to take a little bit of that out, just tighten up around that end. And then going to the lows, I always like to add a little bit of lows in, just to give it some body on the kick drum. And normally I just move this around until I hear it reacting the best with the subs in the venue. Obviously I can't really hear subs right now, it's got these small speakers. Maybe you can hear this on headphones, but I'd find where like the kick drum and the subs are sounding the best together, and I'd give it a little boost. And I wouldn't go too much, you don't want to damage anything, but just give it a little bit, maybe widen it up a little bit there, and kind of start there as my kick drum start point. Onto the compressor, turn that on, and I'll probably just turn that down there. And I don't want to attack too quick, because I want to let the transient through. I don't want to compress the front end of the kick drum. So kind of just turn it down, and then just adjust the threshold until we get in a couple of dB of reduction. Just a 3 to 1's fine for now. And that's just kind of controlling the peaks a little bit. And then we're getting a bit of reduction there, so let's use the makeup gain just to bring that back up. And this is probably a good starting point for my kick drum. I then move on to the snare. That's the drummer to start playing that and start hitting the snare drum. Select the channel. First thing I'd do would be to set the gain, and then turn the channel up, have a listen to it, and let's turn these filters on again here. Let's turn these down. So with a snare top, I normally like to I don't like to gate it too hard. So what I'd normally do is bring the range down and just reduce it a little bit, so that the snare still comes through, but then when the snare's not playing, it's actually dropping the level of the signal a little bit to get rid of some of the bleed. So we want the attack to be super quick, we want the transient to come through, and we want to make sure we get the full length of the snare drum, but just clearing up a little bit of that when he's not playing the snare just gives a little bit of a cleaner mix. But we don't want to drop it too much, just in case he's playing anything quite light on the snare. You want the drum rolls to come through the best you can, you don't want to choke it too much. And again, if you've got the option, why not use a bit of this accent or the transient designer? Get a bit of pop on your snare drum there. So we'll go for that for now. So then moving on to the EQ, first thing I'm going to do is set the high pass filter. So I'll probably just dial this up on the snare drum until I hear it start to take away the body of the snare. And then when you hear it start to take away, like, you know, obviously extreme example there, but when you hear it take away the body that you like, then just dial it back a little bit, like sit there, because now I know that everything below this I don't need. I know it's not going to sound good with that instrument, but it's getting rid of any possible like bleed from a kick drum, or like when the bass starts playing, like the snare drum microphone stand might vibrate on the stage. Just want to get rid of all of that. And then same at the top end, I'm probably not going to want anything above like 14K, so we'll just kind of just get rid of that a little bit there to give us a bit more of a tight sounding snare drum. And then turning the EQ on, same again, I'm going to start with the low mids and just have a listen and see where it sounds the worst. So you might find that you have a ring in the snare that you kind of want to get rid of, or something that's like boxy tone where it's just not that nice. Let's take a little bit of that out, just clean up the snare a little bit, and then I'd probably go to the top end next and add a little bit of sparkle around like 7 or 8K. I mean, if you go extreme, you can hear like the top end snap there. But again, I'd probably just set it quite low. Then I'd go to my high mids and find where it sounds like the impact of the snare hitting the skin is, like the stick hitting the skin. So like around here, and let's give it a little boost there as well. Just kind of sit those there, and then adjust those when the full band are playing. If I feel like there's too much of that, I know it's there, I can dial it in, maybe give myself a little bit more. But for now, I'll go for that. And then for rock bands, I always like to add a little bit of low end in my snare, get it sounding nice and fat. So I'd probably just give it a little boost and then just search for where the low end of the snare is sounding pretty good, and then just give it a boost there and just leave it. Again, adjust later when the band are playing. And onto compressor, turn it on. I'll probably compress a little bit more on the snare, maybe about 4:1. Again, you don't want the attack to be too quick, you want to let the transients through, and you want to make sure that you're not choking the snare at all. And then just adjust the threshold so it's doing a few dB. And then I'd probably just adjust the makeup gain to make up for what we have just taken off there. So I'd probably set a compressor there. And then what I'd normally do now is probably add a little bit of reverb to my snare drum. So I've not got one set up yet, so if I go to my Busmaster, I've got a channel labeled here ready to go. Drum verbs, I'm going to select that. And let's just throw a reverb on here. Let's go for a room reverb. So now if I go to my snare drum, select send 13, drum verb, mute the channel and send some in. We can hear the reverb come through. So let's just send enough and adjust this. I don't want it to sound too big, I just want to give it a little bit of ambience around the snare so it's not so dry. So we want a little bit of pre-delay so that the snap of the snare is coming through. And then we just don't want it to be as long or as big, we just want to give it some ambience. Maybe somewhere around there to start with, and then probably just bring the signal down so it sounds a bit more natural. And obviously this is going to depend on the size of the rooms, any natural reverb, stuff like that. So for now, we'll go with that. And that's probably where I'd start for my snare top. I'd then move to snare bottom quickly. So again, set the gain first, and then let's turn these filters on. With the snare bottom, usually 9 times out of 10 you'll find that the polarity is the wrong way around. So obviously as you hit the snare drum, the two microphones are facing the opposite way, they're picking up the opposite kind of signal, so you want to make sure they're not going out of phase with each other or out of polarity. So we normally invert the phase on the snare bottom so that it matches the snare top, otherwise you might lose a little bit of the low end. I don't know if you'll be able to hear it here if you've got headphones on, but you just want to make sure you're getting the most out of your snare that you can. So I normally do that first and just double check, listen to it, make sure you're doing the correct thing. But 9 times out of 10, if you can't hear it, I just invert it anyway because it's probably going to be that. Then I'd go to my gate and I'll gate the snare bottom more harsh. I'd probably want this just to give me a bunch of low end snap really quick, just to add to that front end of the snare drum. So again, I'd probably turn the threshold up till you hear it stop coming through, and then dial it back a bit, and then probably with the snare dial it back a little bit more just in case it plays some like ghost notes or anything. Again, attack really quick, you want to get the transients through, and you want to make sure you're getting the snare, full sound of the snare through, but you don't want too much bleed. And again, if you've got the option there of the transient controller, why not add a little bit on? So onto the EQ, same thing again with the high pass filter, dial it up until you hear it take away, and then probably just dial it back a little bit. And then turn the EQ on, same thing, low mids. I'm going to find where I don't like the sound of it. Let's bring that out a little bit, and then I'm going to use the top to give me lots of snap. So this sort of stuff here, like I want this to pop through in the mix. And I also like to use the snare bottom to give me a bit more body on the snare in the low end as well. I know some people don't like to do this, but I always think the low end of the snare bottom sounds pretty good, so I'll find where it kind of matches what we've done on the top. Put it there, and then compressor. Maybe not compress as much as I do the top, but again, I'd still compress a little bit. Just as we need to get a few dB reduction, bring it back there, and then I'd probably give a little bit of reverb in there as well. So a bit of reverb, and then mix this top and bottom together, make sure it's sounding good. So put a bit of kick in there. So now we've got kick and snare, which for a rock band you want it to be nice and punchy, so I think this is a good starting point for those. Okay, now onto the hi-hat mic. So same again, you select your channel first, set the gain, and then bring the channel up. So with the hi-hat, I'd usually be quite quick at the sound check, so I'd put the filters on, and I'd just dial this up so we get rid of all this mess at the bottom that we don't need. So it's not playing the hi-hat right now. So as you start to play the hi-hat, just bring this up until you hear it disappear, then just bring it back a little bit. Turn the EQ on. I'll probably bring a high cut in there as well. And then I'll maybe give it a little boost around the top end, see where it's sounding like it cuts nicely. Just give it a little bit of a boost if it needs it. And then have a listen on this low mid for if you've got this build up of frequencies here, and just take that out a little bit. And I'd probably not gate it. And then maybe if I was dialing it in a little bit more, maybe I'd go in and use the expander and just like kind of clean it up a little bit. But for now, we'll leave it off. I'd probably maybe turn the compressor on, maybe a quicker attack than we would on the shells, but kind of just get it so that it's just compressing when he hits the hi-hats a little bit, just to control the peaks if he does hit it a bit too hard. I'll just wait for him to get to a bit where he hits it. So now he's hitting the hi-hats. Let's bring this down. I'll just see it's just controlling them. It's a little bit there. If he goes any louder than that, it's going to compress a little bit more. Maybe turn the ratio up a little bit. Set it there. So bring everything else back in. Kicks their hats. Perfect. Now onto the toms. So let me find a bit where he plays these over and over, so we're not waiting. So onto the toms. Again, you'd select the rack tom. You'd set the gain. Bring it up. You'd probably be hitting it over and over again. So working our way down the channel strip again. Turning on the filters, and I'm probably gonna dial these back, and then I'm gonna set the gate first and try and get it as tight as we can, because there's gonna be quite a lot of bleed from all the other instruments, all the other bits of the drum kit. So let's try and get this as tight as we can. Turn it up until we hear it kind of disappear, then dial it back a little bit, and then adjust the hold and release to let the drum through. And again, if you've got it, why not use it for transient control? And then I always find using the key filter a little bit better on the toms, trying to get it as tight as we can, which we don't want the snare to be opening the tom gate or any of the loud cymbals. So let's just select bandpass, and let's have a listen to where. So maybe here somewhere. So this is where the snare, this is where the tom mic is coming through, and we just listen to this frequency now to open the gate. So it's just a little bit tighter. We can probably afford to bring this back a little bit, and hopefully that won't pick up as much of the snare drum and other bits. And obviously as we go on and the band are playing, we can dial this in a little bit more. The more shows that we do with this console and the band, we can dial it in, get it as tight as we can. So then onto the EQ, same again, high pass. I'm probably going to bring this up until we get in up here somewhere. So I know that my kick drum's going to be between like 50 and 100. My bass guitar is going to be between like 60 and 120. So we don't want to interfere too much with that sort of stuff. So we'll go with 80 hertz at the moment. And then bring the high stuff down a little bit, get rid of some of this cymbal bleed. And then same again, the boxy sound in the low mids. So let's just get rid of that first. So pull that out, and then we'll use the top end to give it a little bit of attack. With rock and metal bands, I always kind of like them to cut through quite a lot, so I'd probably go for where it sounds quite nice and give it a bit of a big boost there. Make sure we're getting cut through, and then give it a little bit of body, find where it sounds good on the low end. And then onto the compressor. Similar sort of stuff as what we do with the snare drum. You don't want to attack too much, but bring it down so we're getting a few dB of reduction. And then give it a bit of makeup gain and a little bit of reverb to fill it out a little bit. Make it sound like it's in the same room as the snare drum. And then usually, for ease, I'd probably try and copy and paste the rack settings over to the floor and then just adjust from there. So on this console, if we select this channel and then go into utility, we can then copy what we want from this channel. So we want to copy the filter, the gate, the dynamics, EQ, and the sends to bus 13 for the reverb. And we want to copy that over to the floor tom. So copy. Now we've come out of this and go to the floor tom channel. Everything's kind of there. So if we then listen to the floor tom, we'd set the gain, and then we just adjust from here. So obviously the gate's going to be different. The where we're picking up here. So probably just adjust this down a little bit. And then, same with all this stuff, we'll probably just move everything down. And it's going to sound pretty similar. And then maybe a little bit more reverb on the floor tom, just to make it sound a bit bigger. Let's take a listen. And I probably want them to cut through a little bit more, so maybe I'll use the makeup gain and the compressor just to give us a little bit more volume on the toms. Something like that. And then let's stop that loop. So then moving on to the overheads, what I do is probably set the gain first, get them good, and then just throw them up. And in most small venues, I'll just pan these left and right. So the left one there, right one there. And same again, I'll probably do a bunch of stuff to the left side here, and I'll just copy it over to the other side. Turn the filters on, turn the EQ on. I'll dial this up, get rid of all this low end stuff we don't need. Because usually the cymbal's going to be pretty loud in the room, especially if we're in a small venue. So we kind of just want to add into the sparkle of them a little bit. So maybe some of this stuff, cut out some of this. I'll probably not use any expanders or gates. Maybe if I was wanting to, I'd maybe compress them a little bit. For this example, I'm not going to bother. So I'd just quickly get together the EQ, and then same again, let's go to utility. We'll copy over the filter, the EQ, and copy that over to the other side. These both up. And just make sure it's not copied over the panning, nope. And then bring all the drums in together. Probably ask the drum at this point to play the full kit. Probably play a lot of tom fills if you can. And yeah, I think we're in a good starting place there for a good drum mix. I then take this when the band are playing later. I can adjust, like if I feel like the bass guitar is interfering with my kick drum a little bit too much, maybe I'll adjust some of the EQ here. But for now, I think we're in a good place with the drums, and let's move on to the instruments and the vocals in the next few videos. But make sure you subscribe down below, and yeah, see you in the next video. Peace.